So let's just add that as a hack because that's kind of a workaround.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Well, and you need to mention that because I didn't know about that, and so clearly there's going to be people listening that didn't know you could do that. Welcome to the Disney Hack Podcast, where we talk about all things, tricks, and tips for your Disney trips. When I set out to create this podcast, there was something that I definitely had in mind, and that was my experience as a professional photographer and all the things that I do when I go to Disney with regards to taking pictures. Since starting this podcast, I made friends with a wonderful photographer who has an amazing Instagram account. Actually, he's got several of them, and you guys need to check them out. And on previous recording, we got to talking about some of our favorite hacks when it comes to photography at the Disney parks. So I wanted to invite him back to talk about all the things that we do when we're thinking of getting just the right picture, whether it's with our family or just that beautiful picture of the mountain with the sun hitting it just right, or maybe a flower growing in a flower bed right off the side of the path. Whatever it happens to be, there's a lot of things to know. And if you're a novice at taking pictures or you're a seasoned pro, we've got some amazing tips for you guys. We've compiled a very full list of things, and we're going to go through them step by step. And we would love to know what you guys think. If you have some tips that we don't cover, please share them with us so that we can maybe do an extra addition to this in an episode down the road. But with all that to say, why don't I go ahead and invite my very special guest back to the show, Mr. Mark Lucas. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Doing great, man. Excited to be talking about photo tips with you.
Yeah, I'm combining my two great loves, photography and Disney. So this is definitely the podcast right up my alley. Now, if it was food, photography, Disney, then it'd be like the trifecta of all things I love outside my family.
That's funny. That didn't even end up on our list, taking pictures of food. We're going to have to schedule a whole nother episode just to talk about taking pictures of food.
Yeah, it's such an Instagram cliche, though.
It really
is. Feel awkward, like sitting at the restaurant taking the photo. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be that guy.
So let me ask you before we get started. When you go down to Disney World, are you thinking about the pictures that you want to take before you go?
I have an idea of what I'm looking forward to taking. For example, in this last trip, I was really looking forward to taking dark ride photos. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. I'd even gone as far as to buy a new lens because that was like the next step and wanted to try. When I went down in June, really looking forward to Happily Ever After being new and getting a ton of photos from that. And like that's definitely something I've got a ton of photos. So I have an idea in the back of my mind of what I'm looking forward to getting. But I also look forward for the spontaneous photo that I'm able to get also.
Yeah, I know you're planning a trip in possibly September, but definitely October. What are you looking forward to taking pictures of down in Disney World for your trip in October?
So I like autumn at the Magic Kingdom. I love the orange and red bunting. I actually think those colors really kind of bring it back to the classic 70s look that it was going for when it first opened. And it's like those colors are some of my favorite. So I really like those autumn photos on Main Street USA. I like the Halloween decorations. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to, like the last two times we went, it was in the summer. And unfortunately in Florida, it rains a lot in the summer. So I'm looking forward to clearer days again. In October, hopefully most of the bad weather will be gone and I'll get a lot more opportunity to get those blue sky photos that really look good.
Outstanding. Well, I can't wait to see them. I know you're going to have some great pictures from all your trips. Let's go ahead and dive into our list because it is very long. We've got 10 items here, but we have several bullets. So there's going to be more than 10 tips here. But when we're done, I'm sure we'll even have added a few more before then. I'll go through and see how many tips we've actually compiled here for people to glean from this conversation. And it might be, I'm going to bet we're probably going to have 50 or more tips that people can pull from this with photo hacking that they can do when they go down to Walt Disney World.
Yeah, we're definitely going to end up with a lot of tips, but we're probably not even going to get the tip of everything that you can do. So like hopefully we'll get through them all and then probably have enough for another podcast.
Absolutely agree. All right. So the first thing you want to do when you're going to Walt Disney World, obviously, is plan your trip. But it's important to plan the photos that you want to take. And we just talked a moment ago about you already know the pictures that you want to take on your October trip. You have a kind of a sense or an idea. But what do you do with regards to identifying what your goals are, and how do you go about, so for example, if you want to get pictures of your family, say in front of the weenies or the icons?
So I always look at this, like my goals are different than what my wife's goals are. Like my wife wants the picture of the family in front of the castle, in front of Haunted Mansion. She wants the family photos that we can look back and remember our times. I'm more about getting the picture of just the castle, getting the picture of the icon, getting the picture of just the buildings and how great the theming is. So you just kind of need to think a little bit about what your goal is. Like, are you the person that wants the photo of the family? Is that how you're going to best remember your trip, by having all the pictures of your family together, enjoying their time there? Or are you going to look back fondly and having a picture of a building and how beautiful that building is and how that building was representing what you were experiencing at that time is going to bring back the best memories for you?
Yeah. Do you ever find that when you're wanting to get a picture of, say, the Haunted Mansion and your family's wanting to move on, it can be a little frustrating for both of you because they want to move on to the next thing and you're wanting them to just chill for 60 seconds so you can get that picture? How do you handle a situation like that? Do you take the picture and move on, or do you tell them to just give you a minute while you take the picture, or do they already understand?
Well, I mean, they understand. They've lived with me long enough to know that I'm going to like kind of stop and take the picture. And sometimes they move on. Like sometimes I'll just stop in the middle and start taking pictures, and they'll be 100 feet down the street before they even realize I've stopped. In the same breath, like we're annual pass holders, so we have the photo pass, and we take, I think there's now over 600 photos of us on our My Disney Experience account because it's something my wife wants. She wants those photos. So myself and my son know that we're going to, when we see a photo pass photographer and she wants a picture, we're going to stop and we're going to take the time to do that. And that's part of our trip. It's just knowing what you want and knowing your party value as far as what they want to get out of the trip.
Right. Yeah, I totally understand that. Now, when it comes to taking pictures of your family with the icons, what are some of the things that you see people can improve upon when they're taking pictures of their family, say in front of the castle?
I think when somebody's taking a picture in front of their family in front of the castle, a lot of times they try to get the whole castle and have their family like 20 feet away. And in that case, they don't have focus on either of them. So what I would say is get closer to your subject. If you're taking a picture of your family, make sure you're closer. Look at how the PhotoPass photographers are taking the picture. They're about 6 feet away. So if your priority is to get the photo of the family, make sure the family is the focal point, and then the castle or whatever you're using as your background is secondary.
Yeah, I used to take a lot of pictures of families as I would walk through the hub at Disneyland, and it would be interesting how they would hand me their phone, or their, excuse me, back then it was their camera. Recently it was their phone, but back in the day they'd hand me their camera and then they would step 20 feet away from me, thinking that I would get the whole image with them in the shot. And I would, sometimes they were foreigners, didn't speak English. I would just use my hand to gesture for them to step closer. And I just keep moving my hand in this gesture of come closer until they would get, 6 or 10 feet away from me so that I could frame them up. Because I already had the castle or whatever the landmark was, sized up in the frame or zoomed in so that it was squared off. I wanted to get them closer so that I could get, just the best picture. And what was always interesting is once digital came out and you could see the shot that you were taking instantly, I always got a really great response from the family that I was taking a picture of. It's a total strangers, but they would be surprised at how good the picture looked. And I think it had an impact on all the rest of the pictures they might have taken on the rest of their trip to know to stand a little bit closer to the camera and not stand quite so far away. Plus you avoid the chance of having somebody walk across your image, when you're standing there with, several feet between you and 20 feet between you and the people you're taking a picture of, you run the risk of having people walk in and out of your picture.
Yeah, and that's at Disney, obviously, one of the risks you always have. Unfortunately, it's just crowded and everybody's kind of in their own space trying to get to their next fast pass, so they don't always notice that what's going on around them. So having somebody walk between a photographer and the subject is something that happens. So if you minimize that space, you're definitely limiting that happening.
Yeah, I find I get asked a lot less these days to take pictures of people because they're just going to take a selfie with their phone.
Which is funny because, like, talk about the ultimate get close to your subject. You're only arm's length away now.
Right.
So we've actually gone to that other extreme where you're not even getting the full castle in the shot. You're just getting the face with maybe just a turd or something.
Right, right. Well, and you might get a pretty good, depending on who's taking the selfie, they might actually get a pretty good shot of that. Speaking of turrets and things that have a real photographic style or aesthetic to them, you have a note here about taking pictures of some of the visually stunning elements or theming and themes around Disney that make it such a photographer's paradise.
Yeah, like one of the things that's great about Disney is it's themed so well, everything makes a good photo. So one of my favorite subjects, if you look at my Instagram, is the bridges of Animal Kingdom. There's nothing significant about them except they look like they belong in either Asia or Africa. And there's just something very cool about how they're themed. The bricks are falling off the ones in Asia. It has that clay, the African style at the one in Africa, and the rusty metal over by Everest. They're very typical of what you would hope to find in Asia or Africa, yet they're very simple because they're a bridge. But it's just visually stunning. Like, you have that dichotomy of everything going on around in the park, but this simple bridge that just fits like it belongs someplace else. And there's a lot of that going on. There's Sunset Boulevard at Hollywood Studios, where the individual components of that street, just taken as a picture, are very visually beautiful, even without getting Tower of Terror in the background. Like, there's the individual signs at Magic Kingdom. There's the way the Tomorrowland sign goes over the bridge with the Astro Orbiter in the background. Like, there's a lot of stuff that isn't quote-unquote icons, but makes for a very beautiful photo and very iconic photo.
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture of Roy and Minnie right at Town Square, and you've framed it up so well. You can see the castle in the background, and there's people in the shot, but they're off in the distance. It's not pictures of the family. It's just an opportunity for you to stop and get an attractive picture of what Disney does so well over what I think other theme parks do, and that is to create this photographer's paradise by making almost everything that you look at photographic and attractive and aesthetically pleasing.
And that actually falls back to one of your favorite hacks from other shows that was actually taken during the time before the park opened, like that before rope drop time at the Magic Kingdom. So Main Street was a little less crowded. Unfortunately, they've moved that statue over against Town Hall now, so you're not able to get that photo of looking down Main Street with Roy and Minnie in the foreground. So I guess we're just left with the partner statue to kind of get you that feel.
So tell me about what you know about the selfie walls. I've been doing a little research on them myself for a potential episode of the Disney Hack. So what are the selfie walls at Disney World?
So the selfie walls are a Instagram creation where there's just these walls in various locations throughout Disney World that have just become kind of an Instagram phenomenon where people get photographed in front of these walls in their various outfits and then post with the hashtag associated with that wall. And they're just kind of a fun way to show where you're at and just remember an experience of what you were wearing or who you were with when you're at that particular point. I know the big new one right now is the moss wall at Pandora, and it's really a beautiful situation because you have this painted moss outside of the gift shop there when you get off Flights of Passage, and it just shows that you're in Pandora. It has that immersive nature about it, but it is a good way to get an up close of who you're with.
Yeah, the walls have been a very interesting experiment. I've been watching them for about 6 months now, and just amazed at how now that they've really caught fire and everybody's knows they're there, especially every 16-year-old to 25-year-old girl out there is going to Disney World and making sure she gets a picture in front of every single one of these walls. It's kind of interesting how people are just sort of making up walls wherever they happen to be. It's like, oh, there's a new Disney wall. They're trying to force it, whereas I think originally it was just this nice colored wall that in the right time of day with the right bounced light off of the wall across the hall. Say, for example, the purple wall in Tomorrowland, you get nice lighting. You get a good color wall that maybe helps bring out the skin tone in an individual. And so because these bloggers and these Instagrammers and these YouTubers have really taken to some of these walls and made them almost notorious, popular, so to speak, people are now doing tours where they just go around and take pictures in front of these selfie walls. So if you're wanting to show the world that you're at Disney World, one way to do that is to plan to go find some of these walls in Walt Disney World and take your picture with them. So and look for a future episode. We're going to talk about the locations, the best time of day to take pictures there, and all the different things you need to know about the top 10 Disney walls. But like I mentioned a minute ago, lighting is real important. So not even just taking pictures with one of these walls. Lighting is so important. We talked in another episode where you and I were talking about Pandora and how in the summertime, if you get cloud cover at night, you get this orange hue from the parking lot. But even during the daytime, if you're in harsh light or you've got light bouncing off of a piece of glass and it's just, it kind of ruins a shot, it's something that you want to consider when you're planning your trips. If you want to get just the right picture, you want to make sure you're getting it either early in the day, late in the day, or if you're going to take it in the middle of the day, maybe taking it in the shade or something like that.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look at. Like you have the traditional photography, like you have the photography golden times. You have the blue hour in the morning when the light's low, so everything takes on a bluish hue. You have the golden hour in the evening, and the castle, the way it's positioned, really takes advantage of the golden hour, as does Everest. And Hollywood Studios, the way, if you get from like the parking lot shooting out over Tower of Terror, you really get a great golden hour opportunity to kind of get that sunset. And so it's be aware of where your light's at and be aware of the time of day and like look for the opportunity to get the picture based on that time of day.
Well, then you had mentioned a minute ago about the PhotoPass and how your wife likes to get those pictures. My wife likes to get them too. We've taken full advantage of the PhotoPass. We could almost do a whole show just on PhotoPass hacks and my Disney Experience app hacks. But why don't we take a minute and talk about some of our favorites and ways that we use the PhotoPass that maybe other people who haven't taken advantage of it wouldn't know.
So one of the ones I discovered this year is we did a Star Wars tour. So my son did Jedi training. And as part of that, they have PhotoPass photographers taking pictures of the whole Jedi training. So what they'll do at the end of that is they'll give a parent a card, and the card will have a 16-digit number, and you can associate that number with your PhotoPass. The issue is the photographers usually take around 300 photos. So if you punch in that number in your My Disney Experience, you end up with all 300 of these photos on your My Disney Experience. The hack we discovered is if you go to the PhotoPass office, and there's one in each park, there's one at the Grand Floridian, one at the Beach Club, and there's one at another resort that I don't remember what it was. But if you go to the PhotoPass person at that location, they can actually take that number, go through, and just select the photos that you need and add it to your My Disney Experience that way. So I was able to take the card with over 300 photos. The person at the Beach Club where we were staying when we did Jedi training was able to go through and select the 20-some photos that featured my son and just move them on to My Disney Experience, so I didn't have the hassle of having the 300 photos.
That's great. When we did Jedi Academy, I ended up putting those 16 digits into my app and getting all 300 photos. And that evening when I was exhausted and wanting to go to bed and wanting to get those pictures somehow uploaded to the cloud so I didn't have to worry about whether I lost them or not, I sat there sifting through all 300 pictures just to find the there were about 80 pictures of the 4 kids that I had with me in my group, and which is quite a bit. It's very substantial when you consider the cost balance. The cost of the PhotoPass paid for itself with Jedi training, but having to sift through pictures at midnight on my phone was a bit of a tedious task, and I would have liked to have gone to the kiosk or gone to the PhotoPass office and have them go through the photos and just give me the ones that I wanted. That would have been a much easier thing for me to do. I could have even done it the following day while I was waiting. My family could have been waiting for a parade or a fireworks show, and I could have done it. So that's a really great tip to have. I'm glad that you guys did that and that you shared that. You mentioned something to me earlier about Seven Dwarfs and the Pirates of the Caribbean. Most rides have a wall with Seven Dwarfs and Pirates of the Caribbean. They don't have one of these. So how does somebody go about getting their picture from these rides?
So on Seven Dwarfs and Pirates of the Caribbean, you just ride the ride. It now takes your photo, and it will actually just appear a couple hours later in your My Disney Experience. And it just uses high-range RFID technology just to look at who's in that card and then associate with with the My Disney Experience linked to that Magic Band. I've also been told by the PhotoPass people that if you ride Splash Mountain or one of the ones that does have the wall, you don't have to scan your band at the touch points. Like, they have that same technology. I've actually done it where I haven't scanned and the photos have shown up. Unfortunately, I have an 11-year-old who thinks it's just great fun to watch that light spin around. So we still do the touch, but a lot of times we'll actually end up with 2 copies of the photo because we're not only doing the high-range RFID technology, we're doing the touch point.
Had I known that then in March when I was there, I would have gone out of my way to find a way to get those pictures from Seven Dwarfs. I don't think they had the Pirates of the Caribbean camera up by then, but if you're going to Disney World this fall or next spring, it pays to know that your Magic Band is going to get those pictures somehow. And if you remembered you went on that ride, remember what time you rode, because even if they don't show up, you can actually go find somebody at the PhotoPass office who will pull up those pictures at the time it was taken, and you can pretty quickly find the picture of your family on that ride and have it added to your My Disney experience.
If you get home and realize you're missing a photo, we've even gone as far as to call the 800 number, and they can look at what you were wearing that day based on other photos and can go in and go through relatively rapidly and try to add. And I had a lot of luck having them find photos that we had thought were missing or gone for good.
Awesome. All right. So you also talked about another PhotoPass hack that can save people a ton of money. And I love knowing little tricks and tips that can save me money, especially if I'm going to go spend $160, $170 on the Memory Maker or PhotoPass. So tell me what you guys have learned with regards to taking advantage of the annual pass holder option for PhotoPass.
Yeah, so we're annual pass holders. We went on a trip in June with my in-laws, and since they were linked to us as friends, any photo that they took with a PhotoPass photographer showed up on myself and my wife's My Disney experience. So they did not have to buy the Memory Maker. They were able to just go on. We were able to go on for them and get their photos and get them printed off for them. So the tip would be is if you know somebody that has an annual pass and you're able to friend them and then go on to their MDE and get the photos that is automatically provided for them. The other one, and you brought this one up, was even if you don't know somebody with an annual pass, if you're going as 2 families, as long as you are linked as friends, which you would be if you're going together and you want to share fast passes anyway, then go ahead and just one of you buy the Memory Maker because you'll both have access to that because you're linked together as friends.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, we did that with my brother-in-law's family, and it was so great because it didn't matter who in our part. There were 8 of us in our group. It didn't matter who was, the point of contact with the PhotoPass photographer or who scanned their pass at the end of an attraction. We were able to collect all the images in the app and then, of course, download them and share them amongst each other, which was pretty great. And with my trip in March, they gave us 30 days to get all the pictures. Of course, I was pulling them off the app that night before going to sleep, but even a couple of them would show up several days later. I was able to, wherever I was at, download it to my phone from there, and then of course save it up to the cloud. So it was pretty great to be able to save a little bit of money. If you're not going with a friend, maybe getting on some of the chat rooms and finding an annual pass holder who'd be willing to
Just keep in mind, you're going to have them go into their My Disney experience to get those photos. So that would be the only caveat to that. We went down almost 2 years ago in November, and it was a short trip. We didn't buy the PhotoPass. It was before we had annual passes. So like a true Disney pro, we would go to the PhotoPass photographer, have them take our photo and hand them our camera. And it's like, hey, do you mind taking a photo of us with our camera? And the PhotoPass photographers have always been willing to do that from my experience. But out of courtesy, we also let them take the photo and we scanned our bands, even though we didn't have Memory Maker. When we got our annual pass a year later, all those photos that we had taken the previous November, 12 months before, actually appeared at that point My Disney experience, because as annual pass holders, your photos stay on for 1 year plus 1 month.
Wow.
So if you were to buy an annual pass before this coming March, all the photos from your last trip would once again appear on your My Disney experience.
That is such a great tip, man. I'm so glad you shared that because I had no idea. That is so cool.
Yeah, it was just a neat little bonus when we got down there. It's like, hey, you remember these handful of photos we took? Yeah, they're now on our My Disney experience. And we actually got a couple of them printed off because they were good photos. We just didn't, it was a short trip just to see Osborne Lights, and we didn't want to spend $160 to get the Memory Maker, but it was nice to be able to get those pictures a year later.
Man, that's so great. How cool is that? That I didn't know that they stayed on there for a year plus a month. So that is very cool. So if you're listening and that's something that also appeals to something you're doing with your trips to Disney, then now you know you have another hack for getting those pictures back if you know there's still time. Let's transition over to talking about just a couple of etiquette items when it comes to photography, photographers, as well as things that people should be aware of if they see photographers in the park. And I know you have one that we're both pretty passionate about, but it is about something that people do that really doesn't enhance their pictures, and that if more people knew about this, it probably would make the experience better for everybody around them, and that is when to use a flash.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, there's really not a lot of good times to use a flash at the parks. Like obviously in a dark ride, if you take a photo with a flash, you're going to disrupt the ride. You're going to adjust what everybody else is seeing. And it's just generally obnoxious to the other guests and trying to enjoy the ride. And it really doesn't help get a quality photo on a ride. The other big thing is, like, you're standing there, you're watching Happily Ever After, and you get somebody that wants to videotape it and their lights on the whole show, or every time they take a photo their flash goes off. The flash isn't going to light up the castle. If anything, the flash is going to make your picture turn out worse because the camera is compensating for the fact that you have a flash, so it's adjusting your times, and it's going to make your picture darker, and you're not going to get as good of a picture of the castle of the fireworks because your exposure is going to be a little bit different, your shutter speed is going to be a little bit different, and like you're actually diminishing the quality of your own photo. So learn how to turn your flash off. There's not really a lot of times you'd ever want to use it in the parks. The one thing is, my son's 11 and like he's getting really serious about photography. And the one thing I've kind of told him as a rule of thumb is, we're going to teach you how to be a photographer without a flash. And then once you master that, we're going to learn about the times it's appropriate to start adding it in, because a flash is just an enhancement. But in most cases where people use flashes, it actually diminishes the quality of the photo.
I can't think of a single instance where using flash, maybe if I was taking a picture of some friends in a dark space at the park and it was about capturing this moment that I was spending with them, but I would never use it to take a picture of, say, inside a dark ride or one of the buildings. You're just not going to light up the Chinese theater. You're not going to light up, Spaceship Earth with your on the camera flash. So I can't think of an instance where it really would enhance anything you're doing. Plus, if you're taking pictures with your phone, it's just going to burn your battery down that much faster. So the best thing you can do with taking pictures in the park in the dark is to turn off your flash. You're going to get better pictures of the fireworks. You're going to get better pictures of the buildings lit. You just have to stand still and hold your breath, professional photographers will tell you to take an exhale and hold that exhale out and snap the picture then, and just try to stand as still as possible, or prop your phone on something, because you're not going to get a good picture of any of those large things or even the small things in the attractions by using your flash.
No, the flash isn't really of any benefit. Like you said, the one place where you would is if you're taking a picture of some friends and you're in an environment where the focus needs to be them. And that's really the only time. But even on a lot of portraits, sometimes your colors end up a little bit off if you use the flash. So like I always say, take one with a flash and one without and see which one turns out better.
Yeah, that's a great tip. All right, so this isn't so much of an etiquette thing as it is just a smart way to use your battery power in the parks, and that is to bring some extra battery power. What kind of things do you do to ensure that you have enough power for taking pictures when you're at Disney?
So the one thing is, like, I carry a DSLR, so I have an extra battery with me for my DSLR. My wife and son share a point and shoot. We have the extra battery for them. So every night we basically run a cycle of 3 batteries. We have a fresh one in the camera going out each day. We have one charging, and then we have a spare. And then we just kind of rotate through those 3. Like as we kill one, we charge it and just move it on to the next stage. And that way we always assure we have enough battery. The other time is I have a Wi-Fi card in my camera. So I'm bringing photos onto my phone throughout the day. So this kills my battery a lot quicker than it would be if I was just using my phone for what I normally do. So I always make sure I have a battery pack for my phone. That way, if I need to charge it throughout the day, I have that capability. And I know you've said you actually take your photos using your phone, so you're burning through your camera battery that much faster. So what do you use to keep up with your extra battery usage?
Yeah, I use an external charger. and it's one that I've had for a while now. It's a brick, and so it's pretty heavy, but it'll charge my phone, multiple times. So I keep it and use it until it depletes, and then I recharge it. So yeah, I've never had a problem with it not being able to charge my phone in the parks. Usually before I go on a trip, I try to run the battery power down on the brick and then recharge it fully before I go, and it'll last the whole trip. I also do things to try and minimize the burn on the battery from my phone by closing down apps, putting it on low power mode, putting it on airplane mode. I definitely never use the flash unless I absolutely have to, and I maybe once or twice just to get a picture of the kids in the dark doing something silly, but it's usually more for me. It's not something I'm going to put on social media. It's more for sentimental value, just to capture that moment. But yeah, I just try to do all that I can. This last trip, I took a GoPro with me, and I don't know if you know this about GoPros, but they burn through power really fast, and they have very small, it's a small camera, it's a very small battery. So I have 3 batteries for the GoPro, and I have a lightning charger that will charge all 3 simultaneously. So I'm carrying those extra batteries with me in the park. As I go through the power in those, I swap out a fresh battery until I run out of power, then I can't use the GoPro for the rest of the day. And that did happen to me on this trip. I don't know how many batteries I would need to be able to use my GoPro for the whole day, but it would have to be several. And because all 3 I would use them in a single day, and then that night I would charge them up before going back into the park the next day. So that's something to consider when you have a point and shoot, a GoPro, you're using your phone, you're using a DSLR, is make sure that you are aware before you go on the trip just how much power usage you're going to need, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you would love to take a picture or even use your phone and the power's gone out. Now, with regards to phones, they do have power cells that they sell in the park for $30 that you can get, and they are rechargeable. So you can get them, and they sell them at the resorts, they sell them inside the parks, and you can get them and use them on multiple trips, and even outside after you've left Disney, you can continue to keep them and use them. And so they're good, but I've had mine for many years, so I use it for way more things than just my Disney trips. I use it whenever I travel for any reason because I want to make sure I've got power from my phone.
So you have said about the fuel rods that you can purchase inside the park. Now, they are $30 at the park. I've seen them for less other places. So if you can buy a branded fuel rod for less someplace else and you take it to Disney, you still can trade it in. And that's a great thing about the fuel rod program. Once you deplete it, you can just trade it in at any fuel rod machine and get a replacement. So you can buy in for less than the $30 Disney charged you, but you can still trade in a branded fuel rod at a Disney station, and there's no additional cost.
Yeah, I think I'll do a little research and find out where you can get those. I think you can order them online, but I'm pretty sure you can get them at some retailers as well, and I'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, and the one thing we've had a lot of luck with, and we have S8s, which is a relatively common phone. We've actually been able to find on Amazon where they have battery cases. So it does make your phone a little bit more bulky, but you're not carrying the brick around then. We do have a brick, but the brick does tend to get heavy. So if you go with the battery case, it's always self-contained, and then you have a button on the case that you just turn on to activate the charging, and it's all like a one-piece unit. And then at night when you charge, it charges both your phone and the auxiliary power case.
Yeah, that's smart. Now, you said you have an S8. I have an iPhone. What types of things can you do on your phone to reduce power burn while you're in the parks?
So the nice thing about the S8 is it has some pretty good power saving settings. You can actually just go in and minimize your power, and it'll shut down unnecessary apps. It'll slow down your processor. It'll dim your lights. And then you can go to ultra power saving mode, where it'll actually make the screen black and white. It'll limit some of the apps that you're able to be on, and it'll keep you exclusively onto networks where you're not hopping and you're not burning that battery going from one network to another. So it'll eliminate like what your network capabilities are. But if you get to a point where in your emergency, they say that if at 10%, if you go to ultra, you still can get several hours of emergency at the ultra low setting. So in the Android, you at least have, in the S8, you at least have that capability to adjust your settings, and it does it for you. Now, things you can do on your own is you can go into airplane mode. You can go into your app folder and just close all your running apps and make sure you're not running apps. At Disney World, a lot of times the cell service is a little bit, so if you can try to stay on Wi-Fi, that'll sometimes help, but sometimes the Wi-Fi is a little wonky. So that's where you kill a lot of battery also at Disney World, because you're hopping from kind of marginal cell service to kind of marginal Wi-Fi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's good. That's a lot of ways that you can try to reserve your energy consumption on your phone, because I'll tell you what, if you are taking pictures with your phone, that's something you have to keep in mind. If you're taking pictures with a camera, that a point and shoot or a DSLR, it's one thing to remember the power consumption on your camera, but you're able to reserve a lot more power from your phone doing that. Whereas if you're taking pictures and you're pulling your phone out, every time you light up the screen, you're burning power. Every time you're flipping through your photos to see something to post to Instagram, you're having to get on the Wi-Fi if you want to post to Instagram, or the cell signal, you're burning through that power. And so it's definitely things to keep in mind, because I know that depending on what model phone you have and how old it is, you could be burning through power a lot faster. So these are all great tips. We could probably do a whole show, and we probably should. I'd love to have you come back and talk just about the differences between your Android phone and my iPhone, to talk about different ways that people can take advantage of apps, take advantage of power saving tips and things like that. So let's come back around to that on another time, because I think we could talk about that for a little bit further. But I want to move on to this next topic, and that is that photography is a numbers game. And before you tell me your story, I want to tell a story about Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams was known for being one of the best photographers. He's certainly one of the most famous photographers in history. And he would tell people that he would take 12 bad pictures before he'd ever get a good one. And even a lot of the good ones we've never seen before. We've only seen the absolute best. And this is a man who was taking pictures with a very large camera, with a very large negative, but he got some amazing photos. And I know that you're a fan of grayscale photography, so I know you know his work well. Photography is without a doubt a numbers game. And today we have the opportunity to take a lot of pictures because of digital storage. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in just take a lot of photos. Like, good photography is a numbers game. The more photos you take, the more likely you are to get a good photo. And the great thing about now is digital photography has made it so it is affordable to just take a ridiculous amount of photos. My wife always gives me a hard time. Whenever I take a photo, the shutter goes 3 times. Not because I purposely make it, but I just hold the button down long enough for it to go click, click, click. I always get 3 photos, because you never know what's going to happen on one of those photos to turn it into a bad photo. So yeah, just take as many photos as you can, because storage is cheap, and that way you have more options about what you want to do.
As a former professional photographer, even when I shot with 35 millimeter film, I would take multiple pictures. And I knew that it was coming at a great expense to me to do that, because I had to develop the negatives and I had to look at the prints and know whether I got a good picture. But if I was shooting a wedding and there was a large group of 25 people in the family that I was taking pictures of, I wanted to take several pictures, because I knew somebody was licking their lips or turning their head to the side. And when you're at Disney, there's really no cost to just snap a few extra pictures. I love it when I hand my phone to somebody to take a picture of our family, and they take 1 picture, and I hand the phone back to them and I go, okay, now take 5 more. Like, literally, like, don't just take 1 picture. I was with my daughter over the summer. We did a trip down to Houston, and I asked her to take a picture of me. She took 1 picture, and so I handed her back the phone and said, I'm going to train you right. You need to go take like 5 more pictures, because the picture she took of me, I was giving her instructions when she hit the shutter button, and so my mouth looked funny, and so I wanted her to take pictures of me smiling or making a goofy face like I was underwater, but she had to learn that skill. It's just not something that people totally know how to do intuitively. So I'm glad that we're talking about this. So if you're listening to this, just start taking a lot of pictures and develop that skill, because there's nothing to risk on the back end. It's not going to cost you any more, and you can go delete the bad pictures and get them off your phone pretty easily.
Yeah, most of the point and shoot and even the DSL, well, especially the DSLRs and most of the point and shoots have a setting where you can just do the multi-photo in one shot. So you just hold down your shutter button and it just automatically does the quick shots. Like, my wife always jokes that whenever she's standing beside me and there's a photograph, it's click, click, click. Like, it's never just 1 click. It's always 3. Like, just out of instinct, I just hold it down long enough to get multiple photos.
One of the other things I like to do is, when I am snapping multiple pictures, is I'll raise my hand up or I'll bring my arm down. I want to, even if I'm shooting with a DSLR, which I haven't used in many years, but even then I wouldn't always look through the viewfinder. I'd lower my arm and get a picture from maybe hip level, or I'd raise my arm up and take it from about a foot above my head. And what's interesting with the technology today is the viewfinder has now become a screen, and it's very easy for me to get my camera in what would normally be considered very uncomfortable positions, but I'm able to frame up just a picture that most people probably would have never thought to even take, but once they see it, it makes perfect sense why I would do that. And sometimes it's just on a guess. Hey, I wonder what it would look like from this angle, and it's usually the one that I like the most and the one that I go with. Now, I know you're a tall guy, so you probably don't have a lot of instances where you have people in front of you blocking your shot, but this is putting the camera up high has often helped to be able to also eliminate people that might be right in front of me. If I'm watching a show, I can get them out of my viewfinder or out of my frame and get a picture over them, but I don't leave my hand up there for very long because I don't want it to also annoy people behind me. I usually put it up, get the shot real quick, and bring it back down.
Yeah, definitely just get those kind of different angle shots. The other one that you talked about, and I've seen it a lot, it's really kind of a cool photo, is if you're on Main Street, for example, early in the morning when the park's less crowded, go down and get low and get that photo right up against the tracks, the trolley tracks heading at the castle. That's a really neat angle I've seen done a lot. But think about those kind of different angles from a lower perspective, or like you said, from a really high perspective.
Yeah, don't be afraid to get down on the ground at Disney to get just the right picture, because you never know. That might just be the picture that, defines your whole trip. When I talk about my time working at Disney, I tell people that one of the reasons I went to work there was I wanted to get so immersed in the magic that I wanted to see the grout between the tiles. And there were times where I would lay down on the ground to get a photo, and sure enough, I'd be close enough to really make out the details in the grout, because that's how close I get to the ground to get a really good picture. So absolutely. The next thing that I really quickly just want to touch on before we get into the apps is making sure that you have enough memory space. You had talked earlier about having the ability to send wirelessly the images from your camera to your phone. I could do that with the GoPro as well, and it does burn a lot of battery power using the Wi-Fi. But I like to use the Wi-Fi at the hotel the night before to also push things to the cloud, so that if I do need to remove images quickly from my phone, I can do that. Also, if you're using, for example, DSLR or your point and shoot, you can format your drives so that they completely erase all the pictures once you've got them off your camera. So it also helps very quickly delete all the pictures, so you have more space. I know you keep pictures on there. I actually just took 13,000 images off of my cell phone, because the app we're going to talk about in a minute told me that I was reaching my capacity on my iPhone 7, and so I just took those images off. That was the first time I deleted pictures from my phone since I bought it in October, and so I still have my pictures on there from my March trip to Disney World. But so I mean, I guess I'm not even following my own rules when it comes to formatting for memory. But what are your tricks for making sure you've got enough room on your phone or your camera?
So I format before every trip. So for example, we just got back at the end of July. I still have my July photos on. In fact, I just looked because we were talking about it. And I only have an 8 gigabyte card. I bought an iFi card because I don't have Wi-Fi on my camera. I have a little bit older of a DSLR. So I only have 8 gigs. And I have the availability to have 1,900 photos at the highest JPEG resolution that my camera will take. And I believe it's around 16 megapixels. So I have around 1,800 photos on it. I know they're all on the cloud. I know they're all on my backup cloud. So at some point, I'm going to go through and go ahead and reformat my card. The big thing is, like, I'd encourage everybody, do the reformat if you're sure you don't want it. You do have the option to erase all, but you still leave a little bit of data there. If you do the format, you're going to clean it totally off, and you're going to have more available space. So just take a couple extra seconds, go into your menu, and do the reformat. The thing that I'm able to do, because I have an Android, is I actually have 64 gig of storage on my phone, plus I have a 64 gig flash drive. So as the photos come in from my phone, they automatically just go onto my micro SD. And all the pictures I take except for my bursts automatically go to my micro SD. So I'm able to actually have my phone not have the storage taken off my phone, but it's actually taken onto a micro SD card. So I can have my 11,000 photos on my phone and move it to my next phone and not have to worry about reformatting to make space on my phone.
If taking 11,000 photos is a problem. Yeah, exactly. Well, and the nice thing is what we're going to talk about next is just pushing that stuff off into the cloud while you're asleep at night. I am a big fan of the Google Photos app. I know you are as well. And let's talk about some of the advantages to having this particular app on your mobile phone when being at Disney, because I've taken full advantage of it, and I still don't think I've tapped everything that this app is even able to do for you. I was told by a good friend of mine about it. When was that? Last summer of 2015. He told me that he was a big fan of it, and I put off using it till the summer of 2016. And I'm glad that I finally did adopt it because it's been one of my favorite apps.
Yeah, so I actually go back to 2010 where I have the Google Photo app because I was early into the Android. So I actually go back to 2010. The really great thing about the Google app is, one, it's great for organization. You can do it by month. And if you're doing photos that are being associated with a location, a lot of times you can go into Google and just search, for example, Disney World, and any photos that were tagged with that location are automatically going to appear. So a lot of times your phone will automatically tag your photos with the location you're at where you take them. So you'd be surprised how many photos, like just by searching the location you were at. So for example, I live outside of Pittsburgh. I can type downtown Pittsburgh because I've taken a lot of pictures like at stuff we've gone to around the Christmas holidays, and it'll just bring a lot of those photos up, and without having to go back to the date. Or it'll at least give me the ball, like it'll give me some photos, and then it'll give me the ballpark of the date that I need to go back to find my photos. Like I said, I have 7 years of photos on my Google app, so I have a lot more photos, but in the same breath, I also ability that it gives you to organize and go through and find the photos. The other neat thing about Google is it'll take some of your photos, it'll put them together in albums, it'll give you little slideshows, it'll give you some, if you do a sequence, it'll give you some motions, it'll give you nice little bonus photos that it'll drop in your app so you can see them, and if you want them, you can download them then at that point. It's kind of a fun little thing that Google does as a bonus. Plus, you can take a lot of your photos and turn it into these kind of enhancements if you want to. So that's always a fun little surprise when you wake up and it says you have a new photo story, and then it proceeds to take a lot of the photos from your Disney trip and show you a slideshow with some background music of like the picture that you took the morning you got on the airplane of the airplane, and then it will show a picture of a map with the dotted line going to Orlando, and it'll then show you like the picture you took of Magic Express, and then it'll show you some pictures throughout the park. Like, it's a really neat how the intuitiveness of that app will give you these kind of bonuses that you're not even anticipating.
Yeah, if it identifies that you've taken 3,000 pictures today, it'll say, wow, there's a lot of pictures here, and they're of different things. It'll make a little video, and it'll set it to music, and it might even give you titles like Tuesday in Orlando, and it'll do that all, and it's all automated. It's not a person putting these things together for you at Google headquarters. It's really a really incredible app, and so I can't, say enough about it. And how much does an app like this cost somebody if they're going to download it, put it on their phone, Mark?
It's actually free. But wait, there's more. So
what?
You have a couple options as you get more photos. And like I said, I've been on there for 7 years, and I have probably around 30,000 photos. So I'm actually on a paid plan now. Unfortunately, I've burned up so much bandwidth that to keep all my photos in the size that I originally downloaded them, Google charges me the whopping price of $2 a month to be allowed to have the right to actually keep the photos in the unadjusted size that I downloaded them. If you are willing to have your photo size reduced down to a size that'll give you, if you choose to print a pretty good 4x6 photo, you might be able to squeeze a 5x10 out of it, but it's going to shrink it down for you. It's unlimited. You can have unlimited photos, no cost, and you can just put as many photos as you want in there. So there are some pay options if you're not willing to compromise on the size of your files. If you are willing to go with the smaller files, then you can have unlimited photos on the cloud for no cost.
Yeah, I chose the free option, and I just now went and looked at my Google Photos folder, and there's 77 gigabytes of images in there. It doesn't give me a number; it just gives me the folders that I have. But 77 gigabytes to date, and I've only had the app for a year and a half, so that's pretty good. And I plan to have it forever. I like I said, it's one of my favorites. It's absolutely incredible. Now, you had mentioned there's another cloud storage service for Amazon Prime users. I did not know about this,
So there actually is. Amazon Prime offers photo storage, and you just put an app on your phone. It'll automatically upload to you, and it's for any Prime member, and it's unlimited size. And my understanding is it is free, unlimited photo storage. If you're a Prime member, it's free. You just have to put the app on your phone, and it'll, same idea as Google, it'll automatically upload them to the Amazon cloud, and you'll have unlimited storage, unlimited size, and it's free with Prime. So it's one of those nice little features you get with your Prime membership if you have that you can take advantage of. I am a big fan of having two clouds. Like, I trust Google's not going to have something catastrophic happen, but I'm hoping that if something does happen catastrophic to Google, that my second cloud will save all my photos. But like I said, I think we're probably okay, but still it never hurts to have this second cloud just in case.
yeah, that's super smart. Yeah, I just looked it up on the iPhone. It's called Prime Photos for Amazon. It probably has a very similar name on the Android. So go to the Google Play Store, download that, and check that out if you're a Prime user. I'm a very proud Prime user, so I'm surprised I never knew about that. So I'm definitely going to check that out. Now, I'm assuming it doesn't have the same features that the Google Photo app has in terms of the photo manipulation options and doing things like animations and that kind of stuff.
Now, at this point, it seems like it's just purely a photo storage. But at the end of the day, I enjoy the bonus of the photo manipulation, and I enjoy the little slideshows I get. But at the end of the day, the Google program for me is just a cloud service that it just has a couple bonuses that are fun. So the fact that Amazon doesn't have those, it's not really a deal breaker for me, because it is doing what I want it to do, which is store the photos.
All right, so we've talked about storing photos. Now let's talk about displaying the photos, and things you need to think of before you go to Disney World and start taking pictures is what you're going to do with them on the other end after you get home. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the big thing is this is kind of where we're going to start talking about how different equipment affects what you're going to want to do is going to affect the different equipment you're going to want to use. For example, I probably have somewhere between 80 and 100 photos hung throughout my house. Some of them are 4x6s, some of them are 5x7s. I even think I have a few larger ones hanging up throughout the house that are ones that we've taken. It's how we remember our vacation. It's what we enjoy. So we buy dollar store frames. We buy the 29-cent prints from wherever they have a special going on, and we just hang photos. And it's one of the things that really helps us remember our trips. My wife will get bored occasionally and throw together a scrapbook. So prints are cheap, and if you want prints, like, that's something you need to think about, because it'll affect the type of camera or what you're using to get it. If you're just somebody that's going to take the pictures and put it on the cloud and then show it on Instagram, show it on Facebook, a cell phone camera is going to give you really great pictures for doing that. It's when you start to get into prints, and then when you get into enlargements, you want to think about maybe going to a nicer point and shoot or a DSLR.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's actually transition into talking about equipment as well, because determining the right equipment for what you want to shoot is super important before going on your trip, but it also has other implications other than just the quality of the picture.
Yeah, so for example, we have a point and shoot that my wife and son will carry, and it's easy to carry. There have been a few times we've gone to the park where I didn't want the hassle of carrying my DSLR, so we'll just carry the point and shoot. They're smaller, they're less bulky, they're simpler. It's just a simpler camera to have. But if you're a photographer that enjoys the challenge with a DSLR, and you don't mind the fact that you might be carrying around multiple lenses, you have the bulkier camera, you might need a bag to carry the things to go with your DSLR, so you might have that little bit of extra time go through security. If you're carrying that bag, then the DSLR might be what you want. But it's just figuring out what's the best camera for you and how you want to do Disney and what you're looking to do with it and what the level of convenience you're looking for is.
Yeah, I shot with an SLR for years, and I still enjoy the functionality of getting a good depth of field, shallow depth of field, or being able to shoot in low light, and different features that it gives me that the phone just doesn't do. But I grew tired of having this bulky camera on my back, and sometimes getting into tight situations where it was uncomfortable because it was pressing into my spine or something, depending on where I was sitting on an attraction or something. And I also didn't want to take the risk of damaging it because it can be very expensive. And so I opted years ago to just use my cell phone for taking pictures when going to the parks. And I have suffered a little bit from quality, except for the fact that now in 2017, the quality of images from cell phones is quite high. And as we said earlier, if you don't minimize the quality, you can still print that pretty large. So you are limited in certain things where you have, say, for example, low light, or if you want a shallow depth of field. One of the things that was interesting to me in my last trip was I decided to take a GoPro, and I didn't want to hold this little camera in my hand. I was afraid that on a roller coaster, for example, Big Thunder is very shaky. And I wanted to get a video of my daughter riding Big Thunder, and I actually have this video on my website. If you go to thedisneyhack.com on a laptop or PC, you can see this video play at the very top of the website. If you look at the website from a mobile app, you just see a picture that was taken. And what was interesting about that was the GoPro was shooting the video and simultaneously taking pictures. But my workaround for not wanting to hold it was I got one of those gloves that skydivers wear, where they mount the GoPro to their hand when they skydive, and they get the selfie angle from the GoPro on their hand. But what I discovered was that was also very bulky and very cumbersome for doing things like character meet and greets. I would bang the GoPro on the wall, or I'd try to reach my hand around something and it would scrape on something, and I found that very difficult. So I would oftentimes take the GoPro mount off my, the strap off my hand and put it in the backpack. And that meant that I was also going to put the GoPro away because I didn't want to take the risk of it coming out of my hand and losing a $500 camera that I just got for Christmas. So, so it did not prove to be any less difficult for me as, say, a DSLR would. And so I did continue to take most of my pictures with my cell phone while we were there, even though I did have some really great video and photos. There were ones that I had prepared or planned to take in advance for the most part.
Yeah, and we've actually, I think once we've taken a GoPro into the park and actually taken a video of us walking down Main Street. Like, it's just not something that we really have gotten into. I have the drone where I've mounted the GoPro in the drone. I think you've even seen pictures of that. Mm-hmm. And like, I have all these different mounts, but at the end of the day, the only mount that I really use is the little orange tube that floats, because the only place at Disney I've taken my GoPro recently is to the pool. It's neat to have all these different options, but a lot of times you'll find that you only use one or two of the different mounts once you get the GoPro. But it is a fun little camera. It's like, if you're looking for something just kind of fun, I highly recommend getting a GoPro. We have a lot of neat shots from the pool, like shots of my son coming out of the water slides, for example. We have shots, one at Typhoon Lagoon, where my son and I are jumping through the wave, and you see Tilly up on the hill behind, and it's kind of backlit. It's a really cool photo, and it was actually taken with the GoPro because we don't have to worry about it getting wet. But yeah, as far as in the park, we don't really use the GoPro. The interesting thing, we were talking about the DSLR, cumbersome. We've established I'm a pretty big guy. So when we go on Space Mountain, I actually hand off my DSLR to my wife, because while I'm trying to get situated in the car, I don't want to take the time to stick my DSLR down in the pocket. So I hand it to her, and she can fiddle with that because she has a little bit more room to work with. And I just stick the point and shoot in one of my cargo pants pockets, and it's wedged in between a seat and a bar and my leg, so it's not going anyplace. But yeah, it's definitely times where the DSLR is bulky, and it is a consideration because you have to find a place to stow it on some of these rides. Yeah,
someplace where it won't get damaged. Speaking of really nice camera equipment, the next bullet point we have here talks a little bit about budget, and you have a very particular opinion about this.
Yeah, my opinion is buy the most expensive, newest, most up-to-date camera you can. And I'm just kidding. No, at the end of the day, the advent of digital photography has made photography largely accessible to everybody. But if this is something you really want to do, and especially if you want to get into the DSLR, don't blow your budget on the newest, best camera right now. like consider buying a used camera. I'm using a Canon T3. So for this, I'm going to talk a lot about Canons, and it's because 17 years ago, I made a choice to buy a Canon camera and bought some lenses to go with it. And when you buy a point and shoot, it's like asking somebody out on a date. If you don't like it, you can just move on to the next one. When you buy a DSLR and you start enhancing it, it's like proposing marriage. Once you start with a Canon or once you start with Nikon, you're probably going to stay with that because all your lenses and all your other pieces are for that camera. So I'm going to talk a lot about Canon, but Nikon's got a lot of very comparable cameras. It's just a matter of going on to Amazon or wherever your store is and figuring out what the comparable is if you want to go with another manufacturer. So I'm using a T3. It is an entry-level camera that's about 6 years old. There have actually been 2 new cameras that have come out in the entry-level DSLR line. And I would recommend anybody starting with a DSLR consider starting out with one of the older entry levels. You can buy a T5, for example, for less than $400 right now. And I think you can get a T6, which is the newest of the entry levels, for around $450. So they take wonderful pictures, and you're saving a lot of money so you can figure out what you want to do with the camera before you go out and buy a more expensive one. You can, like the T3 has all the options and all the different settings. Now they might be a little bit different to get to. It's not quite as easy to change some of this stuff, but you're able to make the adjustments and you can learn on a simpler camera and then decide what camera you want for your next step instead of watching YouTube and trying to figure out which of the high-end cameras is for you now. Save a little bit of money. Make sure this is something you really want to be serious about and learn on a little bit more affordable and basic camera. It's still going to take great photos for you. The other thing is you can look on Amazon, you can look on Craigslist, you can look on eBay. A lot of these entry levels show up on those sites because what happens is, like I said, I have a T3. I'm currently trying to decide what I want to move into. So I'm trying to decide if I want the T7i, the 77D, or what Canon camera is what I want next. I don't necessarily have a reason why I'm going to keep my T3 once I move on. So one of the options I have, I can trade it into Amazon or I can sell it on eBay or Craigslist. So a lot of times you can find somebody who's moved on to a higher end camera will sell their body and you're able to buy a body at a significantly reduced price.
So you're speaking about the camera, but you're just referring to the camera body itself. And that's what all this T3 and T6 terms refer to. So anybody who doesn't know, if they're not up to date on camera equipment, especially when it comes to Canon camera equipment, is they all have these different names, and the names refer to the different level of quality of camera. And so if you want to get into photography, getting a entry-level single lens reflex or digital single lens reflex DSLR camera, these are some really great options. I'm a Canon fan myself, and again, like you said, it was because my father was using Canons when I was growing up, and so of course I adopted them as I became an adult and started using them ever since. But that doesn't mean that Sony or Nikon or any of the other photography manufacturers out there don't also make good cameras. They do. You just have to shop around and see which one you like the most. And if it's something that you want to get into, definitely starting out with something that is a entry-level camera but might have the same functionalities as the higher-end camera, so that as you learn in a couple of years, you'll understand what the different functions do. And we're going to talk a little bit more down the road about the functions on the camera body, but I want to transition over to lenses, because using the right lens for your DSLR is one of the most important decisions that you can make. You mentioned earlier that you got a special lens just for shooting dark rides. So why don't you talk to us about finding the right glass to meet your need when it comes to taking pictures at Disney?
For years, all I've carried the 18 to 55 millimeter. That's what they call the kit lens. That's what came with my T3 when I purchased it. And I had a 75 to 300 millimeter telephoto. And that's actually a lens that I had bought. It's about 15 years old. I bought it before my Panama Canal cruise, which I went on for my honeymoon in 2002. So that tells you how old it is. This year, I did a little bit of research, and I actually replaced both of them with a Tamron that goes from 18 millimeters all the way up to 270 millimeters. So it's in one lens. So I no longer have to carry that telephoto in my cargo pocket. I now just have the ability to go from the very close up 18 millimeter all the way out to a 270 millimeter, which is will take you pretty far as zooms go. And it like is freed up. I'm not near as bulky now. I'm not carrying that extra lens. I was actually able to purchase this lens. It was used. It was less than $200 because it's about 5-year-old technology. They've actually had 2 new models come out since then, but after doing some reviewing, I decided that this was the one that was going to meet my needs and also made my wife happy because it met my budget. And now I have this lens, and when I'm ready to move on to my next camera, I'm going to be able to keep the lens because lens technology doesn't move near as fast as camera technology. So I'll just be able to put it right on my camera. I'm now in a position where, like I had said before, I only have to buy a body because I've spent the money on the lens and bought this additional lens, and then I'll be able to just sell my body and somebody else can purchase that and then buy a lens that'll meet their needs. So like, yeah, spend a little bit of money and consider like maybe even going a level lower on your camera and buying some good glass, because you'll be able to use the lens from camera to camera to camera. Other big thing is, for some reason, for a long time, I looked at Tamron and Sigma. They're aftermarket lens manufacturers, and they make great glass. But for some reason, I had in my head that I needed to buy Canon lenses. The problem is, with a Canon lens, you're going to pay a premium for the name. So never discount the aftermarket lens manufacturers. They make great glass, and you're not paying for that premium for your Canon or your Nikon or your Sony name to be on it.
Yeah, I actually have a set of Sigma lenses and love them. So, and I've been using them for years. I actually began using them with my 35 millimeter body, and I continued using them with my digital. Even though it's recommended that you not do that, I still get pretty great images from my Sigma lenses. So I continue to use them when I do pull out the old DSLR and dust it off. Now, saving money when it comes to buying a DSLR body as opposed to the whole kit, you know, you talked about buying used. What kind of experiences have you had with saving some money? I know you mentioned a minute ago about saving a little money with the lens that you got some time ago and being able to resell it in the after-sale market on Craigslist or on eBay. You got a new lens recently. Were you able to get as good a deal when you were shopping for that as well?
So yeah, I was able to purchase a prime lens. I bought a 35 millimeter, and it was actually a Young Now. So it is definitely a manufacturer that's only focusing on lens, and it's an entry-level lens. It was only $50, and it's actually gone up in price now. I believe it's $75 on Amazon, but it's a new lens. Now, if you watch the YouTube review of it, they'll tell you that it's loud. They'll tell you it doesn't focus fast, and all of that is true. But I was able to get a prime lens for what I consider to be a really great price and find out for sure that was something that would enhance my experience, and maybe down the road I can buy a little bit better of a prime lens from one of the other manufacturers.
So now tell me why you bought this prime lens for shooting at Disney World.
So I bought the prime lens because one of the challenges I wanted to start to do was try to get dark ride photos. And unfortunately, dark ride photos is you need to have a lens that'll let as much light into the camera as possible. That way you're able to lower your shutter speed and open up your aperture. Prime lenses are lenses that only shoot at one distance. And there's 2 that you'll primarily hear about. You hear about the 35 millimeter and the 50 millimeter. I went with the f2.0, which is a really low aperture. And aperture is one of those things, the lower it is, the more light you're gonna let in. So it's able to speed up your shutter speed. So in the dark rides, because you're moving, you want your shutter speed to be as fast as it can be. That way you're not gonna get blur. The prime lens doesn't have all those mechanics for the telephoto, so it's more focused on just being the glass. So it lets a lot more light in, and you're able to get the quality dark ride photos. So like what you're gonna find is the dark rides have varying degree of difficulty. Like for example, Small World and unfortunately the Departed Great Movie Ride were fairly easy to get great photos. They had good light, the ride vehicles move slow. Once you get into kind of your Spaceship Earth, your Splash Mountain, Pirates of the Caribbean, Winnie the Pooh, they're a little bit more challenging. You need to have the DSLR where you can adjust your ISO and you can make your aperture larger, and you can make sure you keep your speed up. It's a fun, challenging little world of photography to try to get these dark ride photos, but these are rides with the right equipment that you can get the photos, and you can definitely be proud of your results. This is also a place where it's a numbers game. My wife always jokes with me when she rides Pirates with me, she's used to hearing the Yo-Ho-Ho song surrounded with click, 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 because my camera's going the whole time we're in there. And because it's purely a numbers game. You just set your autofocus to be on the center of the lens, and you just focus right on it, and you just go for it. The other kind of hack that I found is, we're going to talk about editing in a little bit, but the one thing I do is I purposely program my camera to take photos in the dark ride 2/3 of a stop dark. Because what I found is, on the dark ride, the way they're lit, you sometimes end up getting stuff too bright, and you can't recover if something's too bright. But if it's underexposed by between 1/2 and 2/3 of a stop, you can bring it out usually in post-editing without getting it too grainy. Then you get into Haunted Mansion and Peter Pan. Unfortunately, Haunted Mansion is, from my experience, just too dark to really get great photos, and Peter Pan moves a little bit too fast. It's definitely a challenge if you want to try it, go ahead, but it's someplace where I've not had a lot of luck, and these might just be really good rides to sit back and enjoy the ride, so to speak.
In as far as Haunted Mansion is concerned, there's so many illusions going on that, they talk about, don't take any flash photos. That's definitely one of the rides where I see people flash photo every once in a while when I ride it, and on Haunted Mansion, it just isn't the place to be doing that kind of stuff, because not only are you not going to get a good picture, but you're potentially going to ruin the illusion, not just for you, but for the people in the surrounding dune buggies. Let's talk about getting creative and some of the things that you can do with regards to getting away from just using the auto features on a nice, moderate, or expensive camera.
Most all the cameras now have some level of auto setting, but they'll also let you have settings where you can adjust your aperture. Aperture's where you take the photo and then your background is either crisp or it's blurry. So a lot of times on Instagram, for example, you'll see the pictures in front of the castle where they take the picture of the small statues of Chippendale or Brett Rabbit, and then the castle's blurred in the background, or the castle's sharp in the background. What they've done there is they've adjusted their aperture and able it to get that photo. So that's a tool you can use. If you're on a ride where you're going to get some water splashing, you might want to slow down your shutter speed, for example, and it'll cause your water to look more milky and smooth and give it some motion. Or you can speed up your shutter speed if you want to get the water to hold still, or you want it to be really crisp. So these are settings that are available. What I always say is take your camera out around your home and just play with it there. Like, figure out what the aperture priority setting and how it works. Play with your shutter speed priority settings. Play with your manual settings and see what the different pictures are. It doesn't matter how many pictures you burn. You can take different photos at different settings, and on Google, if you go in and you hit info, it'll tell you what settings you took that photo on. And then you can go back and see it and look at it and say, okay, I want to recreate this, so I got it by doing this. But that's something you want to do at home before you get to Disney World. You don't want to be taking the time to figure out how to use your equipment while you're also trying to enjoy your vacation and trying to get to your next fast pass or dinner reservation.
Yeah, if you wait till you get there, you've pretty much blown your chance to get a good picture. And I learned that firsthand from the GoPro. So, definitely encourage people to play with their camera equipment at home and learn all the different features before they go, even if it's just a few weeks before your trip.
So the other thing you can do is play with your settings. If you have an iPhone, if you have an Android, even if you have a GoPro, play with some of the different settings you have. There's burst modes, there's slow motion, there's time lapse. Like, play with all those settings too and learn what they do, because you might find a place where you want to do that. For example, during fireworks shows, I'll use burst mode, take a picture of the fireworks.
People are just taking one picture when they see the sky light up, but they're missed by the time they've hit the button and the camera's taking the picture, the firework has started to fade and they don't get the picture they want. That's so smart.
So yeah, definitely use the burst mode on the fireworks and just play with what you have available. Play with your filters, but do it at home before you get there. That way you know what you're going to use and what you want to get when you get there. Like, know your equipment.
Yeah, you can have a lot of fun with slow motion and the time lapse. A time lapse on a lazy river at one of the water parks could be a lot of fun. I like to play with the aspect ratio sometimes because if I know the picture is going to be square on Instagram, I'll go to the square mode to take the picture. But I don't often do that, but every once in a while, if I want to just frame it up just right for that, I'll go ahead and do that. And there are filters on your iPhone and your Android, but there's also plenty of apps out there you can get where you can do some crazy fun things with the different filters. Of course, we won't get into Snapchat filters or anything on this call. That'll be a different podcast altogether. But there's a lot of ways you can have some fun with your images if you know your settings before you go.
Yeah. The other one that I have for the GoPro, and I don't know if you've found this one yet, I'll a lot of times just take video, and then I'll go onto my video and just take screenshots off the video because it gives you a lot more to work with. So I don't know if you've done that yet, but that's all my drone photos. Like, I just set it to record a video, and then I'll go through the video and I'll find a particular segment of the video and just take a still out of that. And that works really well from the GoPro app.
Yeah, I have it set up to snap a picture every 5 seconds, and I did that a couple of times. I did that on Space Mountain and Big Thunder. Got some great pictures, and the cool thing is if I just mount the phone and point it at what I want to get pictures of, then I usually just let it decide when I'm going to get the good picture, and then I kind of sift through them. But at the same time, it's also simultaneously shooting video. So if I don't get the picture that I want exactly, I can go back and get that screenshot from just the image that I want. But that is a great tip. So let's get into editing. Now you've got all your pictures. You got the right equipment. You figured out how to use it. You practiced with it. You made a plan. You knew what you wanted to take pictures of. You went to Walt Disney World, got all the pictures you can get. Now you're on the plane ride home, or you're already at home and you're looking at editing and enhancing these pictures somehow. What are some of your best tips for doing that?
So I'm personally partial to Lightroom, and Lightroom is a subscription-based service. It's through Adobe, and the subscription will get you Lightroom as well as some other features of the Creative Cloud. I like Lightroom because the mobile version is really great for just enhancing your photos, just adjusting your colors, tweaking your clarity, and just kind of making your photos pop a little bit more. Don't be afraid of editing your photos. All the really great photos you're seeing, whether it be in print or on the internet, most of them have some level of editing associated with them. So don't be afraid to do it. There are a lot of apps that are available for free, and even the Instagram app has some ability to go in and actually edit your photos.
A lot of the pictures that you see that I used for the Disney Hack logo, I actually edit using apps on my mobile phone that turn images into artwork. And so I'm a big fan of some of those. My favorite, of course, is Prisma, but there's a number of different variations of that take artificial intelligence that uses works of art and your photo and somehow blends them so that your photo has the same sort of style and technique. So that's another fun way to play with your pictures in terms of editing them for a little bit more stylistic bend on how you want them to show up. But you can also just use your phone's native photo app for enhancing some of the exposure or contrast on the back end. I often use Instagram to do a lot of that work before I post it to Instagram, but sometimes I'll even use Instagram to edit a photo that I don't even post to Instagram. I'll then share it in some other place or just save it to my phone's photo roll. So there's a couple of different ways that you can edit right from your phone. But I also use Photoshop, and I have been doing photo manipulation for a long time, so I enjoy getting it on the computer and playing with it there as well. And you said you like using Lightroom.
Like I said, I'm partial to Lightroom because it's more for enhancing photos. The other great thing about Lightroom is it's a really great organizing software. You can add meta tags, so you can go through and click every photo that has Cinderella Castle and label it as such. That way you're able to find your photos a lot easier. And that's actually how Lightroom started. It was more an organizational software. For example, I had a photo of the castle, and unfortunately a girl walked in front of me while I was taking a shot, and it was one of those rare times where I had a pretty unobstructed view. I was actually able to go in using Photoshop and graph part of the base of the castle from one area over where she was and make her disappear. I have one of Splash Mountain where my son's head was in the way, and I was actually able to take some of the wall and basically cover over where his head was with the texture of the wall, because I was just replacing some stone that was in front of us. So you're able to do fun things like that and enhance your photos with little techniques like that using Photoshop. But there's also free ones that are out there. For example, Google has one called Picasso that you're able to do a lot of this type of stuff with. I know of, if you actually are really interested in getting one of those great photos of the castle without anybody standing in front of it, it's not that somebody was lucky enough to get to the castle early enough and nobody was there. What they've done is they've taken a camera and placed it on a tripod and then taken a sequence of pictures, and there's actually stitching software that's available on Photoshop and available on Picasso. Well, it will actually take the different parts of the images, and the stuff that moves it will remove, and it'll stitch all those photos together to give you a picture of the building without the people or without the objects that move during the time that you're taking those photos. That's a neat thing to do if you're looking for kind of a higher level of editing there.
Yeah, a little harder to do handheld, but definitely if you had maybe a small tripod that you could bring into the park, because they don't want you bringing in big ones, but you could bring something in that you could prop the phone up on.
Yeah, it's definitely one you want a tripod for. So, but like I've been able to find, I have a small tripod that's only about 12 inches high that you can set on a garbage can, and there's no issues bringing that into the park.
Have you seen the cinemagraphs lately where people are able to take pictures? They actually shoot a video and then they only isolate one thing that's moving. I saw one recently of Expedition Everest where the roller coaster was frozen as it was coming out of the mountain, but the waterfall was flowing. And I've seen pictures of Pandora too, where everybody in the frame was frozen in time and space, like they weren't moving, but the waterfall coming off the floating mountain was still in motion and falling. Have you seen those?
I have seen those, and that's actually there's a version of that available on the Samsung cameras where it's a waterfall photo where you take the photo and it's basically taking one photo of the item and then taking a series of photos to get you that movement, but it's isolating out everything else except that waterfall. So that's actually a setting available on the Galaxy phones.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, those are a lot of fun, and I can see those really catching on and becoming pretty popular. All right, Mark, well, let's get into some honorable mentions. We have a few other tips that we want to talk about, some things that kind of extend beyond the 10 areas that we were talking about just now. Obviously, there's a couple other things you could do, but this first one is something that we actually recommend you don't do.
Yeah, don't miss your vacation because you're looking through a screen or a viewfinder. And the one example I use for this one a lot is you will see people with their cell phones recording happily ever after. And not just taking the occasional photo, but actually recording it. So they're essentially watching happily ever after through their phone. I can assure you that your phone video is not going to be anywhere near as good as the videos that you can find on YouTube. So put the phone away or only use the phone to get the photos. And if you are longing for happily ever after, and as somebody who's probably watched happily ever after about 100 times on YouTube, just go to YouTube, search happily ever after, search whatever it is, and there'll be a much better video than what you're able to take.
Yeah, so that's for sure.
Put the phone away and just enjoy where you're at.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so many instances where that's true, where you should just put the phone away, especially if your kids are doing fun stuff. Put the phone away and just enjoy the moment, what they're doing. You don't have to capture every single thing that you're doing. Try to save some of that stuff for your memory and not just for your storage, your cloud storage. What's this next one here about? Find a place to show off.
Yeah, just find a place to show off, whether you set up an Instagram account where you want to show off the photos you've gotten, or just print the photos and hang them on your wall. Don't let your photos die a slow and painful death on a cloud someplace. Like, photos need to be enjoyed. They're a form of art. Make sure that you're enjoying them. And like I said, there's a lot of ways to do that. Social media has opened up a lot of options to enjoy them, but there's also the ability to just print them, hang them on a wall, do scrapbooking. Just make sure you find time and a way to enjoy your photos.
Well, we were talking earlier about using your smart TV or your Roku or your iTV or your Apple TV or whatever you happen to have, and your mobile device. If you've got all the photos on your Samsung or your iPhone, you can take and just send them to your television, invite all your friends over and have ice cream or popcorn or whatever, and bring back the old slideshow that our parents used to do when we were kids.
Yeah, I remember families, friends would go on cruises or to Disney World or wherever, and then you would go over to their house and they'd have a party and they would have the slide projector and they would actually just show the slides of what they did.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I'm showing my age a little bit.
Yep. Yeah. It brings back good memories of having people come over and being able to experience our trip through the Grand Canyon, on the screen in our living room with the slide projector and that sound that it made as it went through. And I mean, it's something that I think people want to come over and get a chance for you to kind of tell the story of the things that you did.
So yeah, we said we were going to do a hashtag, bring back the slideshow. But yeah, it's something you can definitely do. You can have that party, and it's real easy now with technology just to cast from whatever device you have onto your big screen and just live through the glory of what you've done and kind of show off a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's something we should probably plan on doing, especially since I went to Disney World with family. We could get together with all of them and have a little fun bringing the family together and kind of reliving that. Of course, it's been several months now, so maybe we should do that on the next trip. But yeah, I think that's a great idea. The other thing that I have here as a note is if you're looking for inspiration, if you're just somebody that maybe is struggling with what should I take pictures of, maybe you've never been before or you haven't been in a long time and you don't know what your options are, Instagram is a great place to go. Do a search for Walt Disney World, see what people are taking pictures of there. Search Epcot, search World Showcase, search Hollywood Studios, and see what kinds of places, things, and angles and options. Time of day, you can look and see where how the sun looks at that golden hour, and know that the Tower of Terror looks really great, and it even looks great after the sun goes down. So you maybe want to be over there right at sunset, so you can get the option of getting that picture and the picture after the sun's gone down. Same with Pandora. Go look at Instagram and see the moss wall and see how people are posing in front of it, and are they standing away from the wall or leaning against it, just to kind of get some inspiration on some photos that you can take for your family.
Yeah, definitely going on to Instagram and looking at the various hashtags. And if you find a site that you like, a lot of times you can then look at the hashtags that they use, and you'll see similar images that other people have taken and kind of get an idea of the style that you like and what they are photographing and how they're getting those photos. So Instagram is definitely a good place to go and get an inspiration and see what you want to do.
Yeah, and you had another really great tip that you shared with me earlier, and that is making your photographic equipment identifiable. So how do you identify your camera equipment when you go to Disney World?
So just as a rule of thumb, we have, just on sticky tape, we have our names and phone number written on the bottom of our camera. The one thing is, my T3 is pretty identifiable because instead of having the black Canon neck strap, I have the red Canon neck strap. So if it would ever get lost, and I knew I went into Lost and Found, I could say I lost a Canon T3 with a red neck strap. And that would narrow it down a lot as opposed to the hundreds of T3s that they probably have there. And you actually told a story that was pretty interesting, that anything that's not claimed at Disneyland could end up being claimed by the cast. And there were people that had really nice cameras because they never got claimed. And my understanding of Lost and Found at Disney World is it is an operation. There's a lot of stuff there. So anything you can do to make your property identifiable will help you recover it. And part of the guest recovery is if there's a way they can identify that it's yours, they will attempt to get it back to you without you even having to go to Lost and Found.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can even call them after you've got home if you realize that you lost something. They are pretty good at it, and you're right, it is an operation unto itself. And if you've lost anything at a Disney park, call them and let them know, because if a cast member finds it, and they often will be the ones to find it, if you dropped it over a railing into something, landscaping's going to find it, custodial's going to find it, and they're going to turn it into Lost and Found. In fact, there's very strict rules about pocketing something. If you pocket a nickel that you find at Disney Park, you could be fired for that. At least you could 20 years ago when I worked there. So if somebody else sees you do that and they report you, you're going to lose your job. So everybody's sort of very attuned to the fact that no matter what you find, you're going to take it to Lost and Found. And they put the name of the cast member who turned it in on the item. And if it's not claimed over a certain period of time, if memory serves me correctly, I believe it was 90 days. It might have been 6 months. But I believe it was after 90 days, if nobody called and claimed it, then the cast member could go back and actually collect that item and keep it as their own. And I knew guys that I worked with in custodial who had $5,000 cameras back in the late 90s. And they had it because some knucklehead went to Disneyland, lost their camera, and never bothered reporting it to Lost and Found. And the cast member ended up with really, really nice equipment. I've known people to lose their wallets with thousands of dollars in it, and cast members have ended up claiming those because they turned them in. So, call Lost and Found, call Disney, let them know, hey, I lost my camera. Make sure it's labeled. Make sure you got your name and your phone. If your name and your phone number is on it, they're just going to call you. Hey, Mark, we found your camera. It's T3, right? Red neck strap. Come on down and get it. Or, hey, why don't we send it to you since you're back home in Pennsylvania? So, you definitely want to make sure you label your equipment. And I wouldn't even go, I would label your phone even, it's easy to identify a person's phone by using, the home button. But at the same time, anything, if you lock it down too tight or you just don't have any, if you forget to put in your personal settings into the phone, it may not know who you are and they may not be able to get that back to you unless you call them. So make sure you identify what your stuff is so that they can return it to you. That's always a really good tip. All right, we got one last tip to talk about, and this is just sort of something fun that you can do with your kids. Why don't you talk about what you did in a recent trip with your son?
Just hand your camera off to your kid occasionally. Now, I'm not saying if you have a expensive DSLR to give it to your kid, but we've actually purchased my son a point and shoot this year. He's 11. He's really excited about photography, and we went on Amazon and found a nice refurbed Canon PowerShot. We purchased it, and he's using it to go through the parks and take photos. And it's interesting looking at what he takes photos of. Like, he needs help, he needs guidance, but he has a really good eye sometimes. And it's a numbers game. He'll take a lot of photos, and a lot of them, it's like, oh, I'm not even downloading this one. But there are some that you look at, and it's like, wow, this is a really great photo. And it's a totally different perspective than what maybe you're ever doing. So it's a great way to get them interested in a hobby. And it's a great way to kind of get a different perspective on what you see when you go to Disney World, because they might not see it the same way.
Yeah, things that are going to be attractive to their eye is they're going to want to take a picture of it. And you're going to think, wow, I didn't even think to photograph that. And it might actually be something quite unique and interesting that would help inspire their love for photography. Like your son is now having this interest in it because he has this opportunity to express himself. As we've said, photography is a form of expression. And when we went in 2014, we got my daughter a disposable camera because we didn't want to spend a lot of money on camera equipment. But a nice way to try it out is to go to your local convenience store, go to CVS or Walgreens, get your kids one of those little disposable cameras. And she knew she was limited. She had 36 pictures, and she took extra special care to make sure each one was really unique. But what was fun for me was taking pictures of her, taking pictures of things, because sometimes she was taking a picture of a butterfly at the Flower and Garden Festival, and another time she was taking a picture of her cousin posing with Anna and Elsa. And what was great is I have this picture now of her being 6 years old playing PhotoPass photographer and being able to actually take the pictures herself. And of course, when we got home, we were able to go and get those developed, and she's got them somewhere in a book of photographs somewhere in her room.
A great way to give them another way to express themselves. So yeah, just have some fun with that one.
Yep. Well, Mark, I'm all tapped out. I've got, I don't know if I've got any more tips in me. I know there's a lot more photography tips, and we'll probably have to do a part 2 one of these days. But until then, why don't you tell folks how they can find you and find your pictures on Instagram?
My pictures are available on King of WDW on Instagram. I also have grayscale_Disney World, and that's all black and white photos. So it's a different way to see the photos that you may have already seen in color or that you may be used to seeing in color. I also am available at kingofwdw.com, where I will have a blog post that will kind of companion this and show some of the photographic examples of what I've been talking about today.
Yeah, so all the pictures that we talked about, the pictures of the bridges, the pictures of the dark rides. I know you got some great pictures of Splash Mountain and Navi River Journey and Pirates of the Caribbean. So I'll point to that in the show notes. We'll send some folks over to your website to check those out, because I love your work. I really like the work you're doing on the grayscale_Disney World Instagram account. It just looks like something right out of the wonderful world of Disney from its black and white days back in the 50s. And I really like looking at those pictures. I love it when they show up in my newsfeed on Instagram. So folks, check out Mark's stuff, connect with him, follow him, subscribe to him, and let him know that I sent you. And Mark, I'm going to really enjoy having you back. But in the meantime, folks, make sure to check out the Disney Hack. Go to thedisneyhack.com. You can find links to everything that I'm doing there, as well as past episodes. You can subscribe on iTunes and follow me on social media. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out and let me know. It might become a future episode. I want to thank everybody for their time and attention to these shows. I really enjoy doing it, and I hope you're getting a lot out of it. The feedback has been really good. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this up right now. And until next time, remember not to use that flash.
And to thank the Phoenicians.
I'm going to leave that in. And thank the Phoenicians. That's right.